Welcome back, Ultimate Weapons. It's the Night Sky Prince again. One thing I've always wondered regarding Final Fantasy XV's release was how Tetsuya Nomura felt about the game. Well, we may have just gotten our answer to that question. In an interview with GameSpot, Nomura was asked what Kingdom Hearts meant to him, where he detailed exactly how he started working for Square in the first place. Nomura said, quote, "It's probably the title that best represents who I am. When I was starting as a developer, like I wasn't an industry veteran yet. When I was creating Final Fantasy titles with Mr. Sakaguchi, the father of Final Fantasy, and at the time, he said that Final Fantasy is a game that has everything in it. I don't think that there are many people left in Square Enix that have actually worked with him on Final Fantasy. Of course, Final Fantasy is still continuing on, and they are committed to pushing out titles. But when I started creating Kingdom Hearts, that was when I kind of had time away from Final Fantasy. And of course, I am working on a Final Fantasy title right now, but it was at the time I was not working on a Final Fantasy title, and I wanted to realize what Sakaguchi-san said about Final Fantasy, that it is a game that incorporates everything to Kingdom Hearts. So I brought that idea to Kingdom Hearts. Currently, looking at the newer Final Fantasy titles, to be honest, I don't think it incorporates the idea of having everything. So I think that Kingdom Hearts, to me, is the game that has everything in it. That last part is almost a direct diss at Final Fantasy 15, it seems like, or quite possibly both at 13 and 15. Of course, Nomura can't give his true feelings on these games, as he works for Square Enix, and of course, if he were to be too direct, it would be potentially disrespectful to his co-workers, many of these team members that he worked with before when the game was still known as Final Fantasy Versus 13. But for him to say, currently looking at newer Final Fantasy titles, to be honest, I don't think it really incorporates the idea of having everything, is quite a telling statement on just how he feels about Final Fantasy 15. Nomura hasn't made an official statement on Final Fantasy 15 since he stepped down from the game's development back in September of 2014. Most likely because he hasn't been allowed to comment on the game directly, especially if those comments are an internal critique. Of course, even the people who work for Square don't necessarily like all of Square's games. In fact, it wasn't until recently that Hironobu Sakaguchi actually admitted that he thought Final Fantasy II was bad. When Final Fantasy 15 released, it was met with a bit of a mixed reception. Some players simply felt that the game was missing a cohesive story, and some parts of the story were entirely missing and repurposed for DLC. Many of the concepts that Nomura had established over the 7 years of Versus 13 hype that he led were simply washed away. Such things as the Niflheim invasion of Insomnia were completely cut from the game, and of course instead were made into a movie, arguably a decent movie, but instead of Noctis being there when his father is killed or when he loses his hometown, it's just all done inside of like a newspaper article. However, the flip side of this statement is that it could potentially bode well for Final Fantasy VII Remake. In terms of directors, Nomura is one of the last ones who has worked directly under Hironobu Sakaguchi, as well as one of the major players in the franchise, since his key role as character designer for the original Final Fantasy VII. It means that as he's developing Final Fantasy VII Remake right now, he's going into it with the belief that the game should be a game that has everything, and is at least complete, filled with content and a work of art, at least in theory. So what do you Ultimate Weapons think? Do you think Tetsuya Nomura is dissatisfied with the way Final Fantasy 15 turned out? Or do you think when he says the current Final Fantasies don't have everything, that he's referring to something else? Subscribe and let me know in the comments below. And if you're really a fan of Nomura, whether it's his character designs, Kingdom Hearts, or all of his work at Square Enix, be sure to join our Facebook group, Ultima, Square Enix plus JRPGs, where we meme this guy non-stop. Link in the description below.